Hello and welcome to DFS Coach Talk. It is Tuesday, May 5th, 2020. I am Andrew Hansen, and I'm very happy to be joined by the star of all things fantasy for DFS Coach Talk, Santino Cocone. Santino, happy Cinco de Mayo.
Happy Cinco de Mayo to you as well, Andrew. Thank you for that great introduction. Very, very humble of you to pass your starship to someone else, but
Sure.
I appreciate it.
I'm happy to share it with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're a man of many talents. Going to crush the MLB season for us, leading up some baseball lineups if we ever get that going. And in the meantime, exciting day here early this morning on May 5th, 2020. It was opening day over in Korea in the KBO, and it was a good day for DFS Coach Talk. We provided lineups to our members, and the one lineup that we provided on both DraftKings and FanDuel cashed. So how about that for an opening day baseball success rate?
Yeah, and it cashed pretty high too, in the top 50, I believe. Can't ask for much better than that on a sport that no one really knows. Well, we know the sport, but a league that no one really knows.
Yeah, I've got to tell you, it was fun to dive in and break down the pitchers. We actually, I think the thing that set us apart was we selected a value pitcher who was in the 6K range, and he took a perfect game into the seventh inning. Wow. For a team that was an underdog. And the reason we selected him was because he's a veteran in Korea. He had a solid year last year, and the favorite had a pitcher who got banged up in the States last year and was making his first start in Korea. So we went with a veteran, at a lower price, and that really paid off. So for those of you who are new to the program, the three sports that we cover are the NFL, the NBA, and Major League Baseball. And when we launched in early 2020, we weren't planning on covering the KBO, but that's what we're going to do until we get some MLB back in the States. So go check out our website at DFSCoachTalk.com. If you haven't, you can pick up a membership, a weekly, monthly, or a yearly. And we're not going to charge for the KBO coverage. The memberships are frozen until we get a American sport back up and running, baseball or basketball. So we invite you all to do that. So that's baseball, Santino. But of course, we are talking football here today. Mm-hmm. We are continuing our 32-day virtual tour of the NFL. We're covering one NFL team per day from a DFS perspective. And today we get to cover the formerly known as Tampa Bay Buccaneers, now known as the Tampa Bay Gronkaneers, team that went 7-9 last year. And so as we continue through the NFC South, I'm glad to see you've got your Buccaneers colors on today.
Yeah, we didn't even coordinate this. We both came in on red, and first thing I noticed that, oh, you got red on, and then I remembered I have red on too. I didn't play it. I put this on not realizing that the Bucs were red when I was doing it, and then when I saw you have red, I said, oh, I did it unknowingly. I knew I was doing something. Subconsciously.
Yeah, and for me, I thought this was the closest thing I had to Buccaneers colors. I am red-green colorblind, so I wasn't sure. I mean, I probably would have said that they were more orange than red, but I'm going to defer to you on that.
Yeah, little red and more brown than black. I mean, a mix of all of that. But funny, I was just a little cold because we're used to the 70-degree weather the last couple of days. Now it's in the mid 50s, so I just put a sweatshirt on and it happened to be red, and here we are.
That's right. So, all right, well let's jump in here to the Buccaneers.
Pretty uneventful off season.
Yeah, not much to talk about here. Just another season, same crew, 7-9, back again. Yeah. Same coaching staff, Bruce Arians, who, has a really strong winning percentage, 56, 39-1. He's won 59% of his games, so he's coming back for a second year with Tampa Bay. Same coordinators, Byron Leftwich on offense, Todd Bowles on defense. And I want to start with the defense because like Carolina, who we covered yesterday, this was an important defense for fantasy because you could really attack them through the air. They were 30th in passing yards allowed at over 4,300 yards. They were 25th in passing touchdowns allowed. They were 29th in points allowed. They gave up 28.1 points per game. And then surprisingly, they were decent, well, better than decent. They were excellent against the run.
Yeah,
They were
they're
number
elite.
one in the NFL. They only gave up 1,181 yards rushing, only 3.3 yards an attempt. And they actually stonewalled Christian McCaffrey in primetime week 2, which um, was pretty significant. So,
How many
uh,
teams could say that?
yeah, seriously, that was
If any.
a major accomplishment. We just talked about how he was an absolute stud with one of the best floors in fantasy. So, sort of a tale of two halves, if you will, with their defense last year. Really poor against the pass, but strong against the run.
Yeah. They were in a lot of shootouts. A lot had to do with Winston's turnover ratio, which was we won't even get into that, but it was bad. They gave up the most pass attempts per game at 41 and a half, so teams wanted to target them. If you look at 20 plus yard plays, they were ninth in the league. They gave up 57 yards over, or 57 plays over 20 yards, and 40 plus yards, which is huge. They gave up 14, which was tied for fifth most. The most in the league was 16. So they were giving up a lot of plays. But one thing that stuck out to me when I was looking at this is they did get to the quarterback. They were seventh in the league in sacks, so that helps the pass defense. And they were eighth in the league in completion percentage against. So they were getting torched with big plays, big plays, big plays. But would take out those big plays if they can curb that, because they did have a very young and inexperienced secondary. They were really good defending the pass without those big plays. I know one guy we'll probably get to later. He had a pretty good year at when he started taking it over. It was Carlton Davis. After they got rid of Hargreaves, I say his name wrong. Hargreaves, the veteran corner, they put him in there, and he actually had 22 forced incompletions on his own and he graded at 72.1 against the pass. So he was pretty good. If everybody else can step up their game a little bit with another year of experience, hopefully it curbs. But yeah, if a team's giving up shootout like that and big play after big play, it's something you're going to want to target.
Yeah, you mentioned those 40-yard plays, 14 of them. So that's almost one per game.
Yeah.
That's not a good ratio. And
Yeah.
you mentioned the turnovers from Winston. I do want to get into those, as depressing as it is. So let's talk about the offense a little bit. They were last in the league in turnovers. They had 41 turnovers. Winston had 30 interceptions and 9 fumbles. Absolutely pathetic. He did have success through the air.
He led the league in passing yards,
Yeah,
which shouldn't shock anyone.
yeah. So over 5,000 passing yards. Their net, even with 47 sacks that he took, their net passing yardage was number 1 in the league. They were third in passing touchdowns with 33. On the ground, pretty poor though. They were 28th in the league at 3.7 yards per carry. And I guess we might as well get to the elephant in the room. Jameis Winston is no longer the quarterback of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and that has to be very exciting for everybody in Florida, everybody in the Southeast, really.
Yep. I think they brought in some guy named Tom, I believe.
Thomas?
Thomas. I forgot his last name, but he's a veteran journeyman. He's played all over the league for a while. Not that I think he's better, a little above average, but his name's Tom something.
Is he? I think he's
Hopefully he's an
related to
improvement.
I think he's related to the new coordinator for the Panthers, right? He comes from that. Is it the Brady family?
Oh, the Brady Bunch. Yeah, his family started in a show back in the day. It was a very successful show. Yeah, this is just a huge upgrade for them. For a team that was top 5 in every category, pretty much in passing attempts, passing yards, passing touchdowns, total yards, points scored. Now you get rid of a guy who turned the ball over just as much as he was successful with it, and you bring in the greatest quarterback of all time. Even at his age, he's going to be 43, and he had pretty much his worst year last year, but he didn't have any weapons, let's be honest. And now this year he's going into a team that is full of weapons, and I expect him to be what we're used to.
Yeah, this is a game changer for Arians. He's just got to be so excited to just have a complete reversal of a guy who it's like Winston, he didn't care about ball control. He didn't care about getting sacked. I mean, 39 turnovers and 47 sacks, that's 86 plays that are just killers. That's five a game. It's more than five a game where you either turn it over or
Yeah.
get sacked. And then you look at Brady last year, everybody's going to talk about, yes, his yards per attempt were down, but he only had 8 interceptions and he only took 27 sacks. So that's, 35-ish, terrible plays, but it's 50 less than Winston. That's three per game. So it's almost once a quarter instead of turning it over or getting sacked.
Yeah.
He's not gonna turn it over or he's gonna throw the ball away. That's the problem. Winston will take all these sacks. Brady will throw it away, especially as he tries to, maintain his health here at 42 years old. Any sense of trouble, he would just ditch it out of bounds, avoid the sack, and keep the possession rolling.
Yeah. There's some throws that Winston you just scratch your head on. Unless he's on your fantasy team, then you'll take all these terrible numbers and you played him that week. Who cares if he throws 3 interceptions? That's fine because he's throwing for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. But if he's on your team as a real quarterback, some of his throws you just scratch your head. Some of the times he holds the ball way too long. And he sometimes he throws the ball like he is Patrick Mahomes. He has his arm, and you see when you're not the elite of an elite in an arm talent that these just go into the other team. But one thing that was pretty interesting is Winston attempted 630 pass plays last year. Brady wasn't too far behind, so he was at 620. So if you keep even somewhat of that range, you expect them to be a lot more competitive though with an actual quarterback. But if they're somewhat similar in pass attempts, I expect his numbers to jump. And then one thing that I was looking at Bruce Arians, two-time Coach of the Year, by the way, congratulations. The last 4 years he's coached, well, because he missed 2018 because he retired again, but 3 of the past 4 seasons he was a head coach, he had a top 6 overall pass offense. The only year that he didn't was Carson Palmer's last year, where he started 9 games and he retired after the season, or started 7 games. The other 9 games were started by Drew Stanton and Blaine Gabbert. So I can't blame him for not having a top 6 offense. But pass offense, he's pretty much always in the top tier echelon. Rushing offense, never really there. So if you put those two together, Brady's looking at a very good season ahead of him with 2 superstar wide receivers, pretty good offensive line. The weakness on the offensive line was the tackles, but they addressed that in the draft with their first round pick, Tristan Wilfs, and then they signed one of their only free agent that they signed besides Brady and was a tackle, Joe Haig. And then they got Gronk, who's been historically one of the top blocking tight ends in the league, so that will help him out. But their guard and center combinations, the interior line, they combined for an 80.4 pass blocking grade in 2019, which was the second highest among all interior lines in the NFL. And the guy, Ali Marpet, he's probably their best lineman overall. He's ranked as top 12 overall guard in the last six years with at least 2,500 snaps. So they have a pretty good line and they addressed some of their weaknesses. And as long as Brady has some weapons, which he didn't have last year, that 4,000 yards is going to be a distant memory, I think.
Yeah, we talk about the excitement for Arians with Brady making the decision to move to Florida and take up residence at the old palace of Derek Jeter. But then they made that great move to go up and get Tristan Wirfs in the first round, a big tackle from Iowa. So they are really trying to welcome Brady with some support. So he has to be encouraged by that. But yeah, the weapons, that's going to be a game changer for Brady. And it's funny how you mentioned the similar pass attempts, the numbers between Winston and Brady last year. They actually were only separated by 7 completions as well, 380 to 373. So they actually had almost the exact same completion percentage. But if you add on, if you take the difference of basically the 20 plays where Brady would have just thrown it out of bounds to avoid the sack. If he had taken a sack like Winston and not just thrown it away, then he would have been up around 63% completion rate. And that's with a group of weapons, as you referenced, that is inferior, I'd say, to
Yeah.
say the least, compared to this crew with Tampa. So again, I think the numbers in New England are a little bit misleading. Um, Belichick is certainly notorious for game planning. He'll run up the score, but he's not going to just try to inflate numbers if he doesn't have to. He's going to go with what works. So lots of times that's the running game, and if they have a lead, Brady and Belichick together aren't going to make mistakes. So he didn't have a monster year in terms of yardage or touchdowns, but again, his touchdown to interception ratio was 3-1, and that's what it's been throughout his career. Whereas Winston is like 1.5-1. So
Yeah.
just completely different. And Brady still had 8 of his 16 games with at least 2 touchdown passes. So even last year he wasn't a GPP monster, but he was pretty solid as a cash game option in those matchups that sort of made sense, where they were going to attack more through the air than on the ground.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny how less than a decade later, 4,000 yards is, oh, it's just 4,000 yards. But in 2010, 4,000 yards is, wow, they hit 4,000. You didn't really do that. But yeah, he was still 8th in the league in yards per game last year in a really down year. If you look at his career, it was his worst year since 2000. I think his second year in the league was his lowest touchdown since his second year in the league. But yeah, he was 5th in attempts. You put these better weapons on him. These are probably the best weapons he's had since Wes Welker, Randy Moss, since those ages. When Aaron Hernandez was before all that stuff went down and Gronk was up in there. But this is probably his best weapon since then, because he has 2 all-star wide receivers, and we'll get to them in a little bit. But you have a coach who knows how to pass, who has built great passing games with less to work with. And I expect his numbers to stay in the top. I can't see him dropping out of the top 10 in yards per game average. If he did it last year with what he had, this year is going to look like a cakewalk for him. 24 touchdowns. It's going to be hard to have those 2 caliber wide receivers plus a Gronk, OJ Howard, etc., Cameron Brate, and not have 30 touchdowns. It's just going to be very hard. There's going to be a lot of times that he's going to have multiple touchdowns. I know you said last year 8 games with multi touchdowns. That should be in the double digits this year. So he's going to make for a safer play. The only thing that would scare me off on him a little bit is the name value. And now that he's on a new team with these weapons, his price tag's going to jump up. So I assume that you're not going to get the Brady discount that you got last year. You're going to pay for a top 5 guy, and you're going to expect that if you pay for him.
Yeah, that'll be fun to watch the price tag early on. Last year, he never even got to 7K on DraftKings, but that should change with the weapons that he has in some of these matchups in the high-scoring games in the NFC South. And Santino, what we've been doing recently is going to the backfield, but let's just transition into these pass catchers, because we've been referencing them, and it was kind of funny how you talked about that 50 touchdown season that he had with the Patriots, where he had Welker and Moss and Gronk, among others. And it's sort of similar with this group. We've got Evans, the deep threat. We've got Godwin.
The funny thing about Evans is he is one of the fastest players in the league. But you say deep threat, you think of a smaller guy. This guy's 6'5", 230 plus pounds. I don't know how he's so fast and how he beats people like he does, but he's a monster. You'd expect more of a possession type jump ball receiver. This guy just burns people down the field at his immense size.
Yeah, he really does. And really a strong 1-2 combo, as you mentioned, all pro type production with he and Godwin. And then the tight end group we'll get to, 3 of the best tight ends in the NFL. But let's start with Mike Evans. This is a guy who 6 straight years to start his career with over 1,000 yards. He averages about 1,200 yards a season and 8 touchdowns. he was a little bit down in catches last year, but he missed a few games. What are you expecting from Mike Evans this year?
Uh, Pretty much par of the course for this guy. If he's had 1,000 years every year of his career, I expect that again. Like you said, he averages 8 touchdowns. I expect at least 8. He missed the last 3 games last year. I remember watching the play that he got hurt on. He scored a 70-yard touchdown, and right at the end of it, he came up limping, and his hamstring he pulled, and then missed the rest of the year. That's just unfortunate, bad luck. But yeah, this guy averages 17 plus yards per catch over the last 2 years. That's fantastic. He's top 4 in yards per game over the past 2 years. Both years he's top 4. He was on pace for 145 targets last year before he missed those last 3 games. He's an elite wide receiver who doesn't get talked about among the groups of elite wide receivers. We put him in usually the tier 2, the tier 2 of wide receivers, but this guy's a top 10 guy, hands down, with what he's done throughout his career. And what he's going to continue to do with Brady throwing to him. And again, he's a red zone option too. He's 6'5", 230, so he can get over people if he needs to. But yeah, he's really good. And when you have a guy on the other side of the field that is extremely talented as well, it's going to be hard to double team any of those 2 guys, because Brady will pick you apart if you double team one and leave the other one on one-on-one coverage.
That's right. Brady does not discriminate. He just finds the open man.
Exactly.
So, Evans, you mentioned you being out at the end with injury, but he's been a pretty reliable guy. His first 5 seasons, he played either 15 or 16 games every year. So certainly he'll be healthy and ready to go. Catch rate, not as good as Godwin, only 57%, but he managed to get those 8 touchdowns. He had 3 games of at least 39 fantasy points. So he had 3 ceiling games. He had 4 games under 10. So he had a bit of a lower floor than Godwin, but he's the first of this entire crew that's just going to be so thrilled to have Brady. I guess the one question here with Evans is, will Brady be able to deliver the deep ball with as much success as Winston? Although Brady is in this battle with Father Time and he's basically winning it, I'd say, at 42. We can't expect his arm strength to probably be the same that it was that year with Randy Moss when he threw for 50 touchdowns.
Yeah, it won't be the same Brady as then, but as a Dolphin fan and as a football fan and a fan of elite players and of the GOATs, this guy's the greatest I've ever seen. When he wants to say he's done, he's done. Until then, I'm not going to doubt him. Sometimes it comes up. A lot of people say, oh, he's done. They want to be the first one to say Brady's done, kind of like LeBron James. They want to be the first one to say he's done. But until he tells me himself he's done, or tells the world that he's done with football, I'm going to assume that he's going to be Brady and be one of the best out there. As far as the Evans, I like how you mentioned that he does have that huge ceiling. And that's one thing with him. He has a lot of games where he doesn't produce as a top tier wide receiver would on a consistent basis. But then he has those games where he just blows up. He had a couple games over 200 yards last year. And those are the games where you want him. Sometimes you'll see like dud, and then you got to get all over him, especially in a GPP, because he's the guy with a low floor but a huge ceiling. And he tends to get a lot of his production in a handful of games.
Absolutely. So let's look at his partner, Chris Godwin, who's coming off his best year in the NFL, his 3rd year, when he got 86 catches and 9 touchdowns. Tell me your thoughts on Chris Godwin as we get ready for the 2020 season.
I think he's going to be Brady's favorite target. He's pretty much been a stud when he's gotten the time in the league. If you look back at his throughout his career, his rookie year, he only had 3 games over 70% of the snaps. So he wasn't really playing in the year. They had Deshaun Jackson pretty much in his role. Even not this past year, but 2018, he started to get more and more time. He put up over 800 yards. Second he had 14.44 yards per catch in all of his games. But he started to get more of the playing time, and you could see the talent that he had. He's a crisp route runner. He's explosive with the ball in his hands and in space. And I think Brady's going to love him. But then last year, you mentioned it, he finally got a coach who wanted to play him in a starting spot where he didn't have to be behind a Deshaun Jackson or someone. And he blew up. He was second in the league in yards per game. He also missed 2 games at the end of the year. He had 1,333 yards, 86 catches, pretty much on line with his career yards per catch average at 15.5. His career is 15.44, so not too much. 9 touchdowns. Even in 2018, he had 8. So he's an explosive guy when he has open field. He was first in the league with plays over 20 yards, and he had 0 fumbles. And the biggest thing I would say or 2 things, he was 6th in yards after the catch. So again, explosive. And he only had 1 drop all year. There's nothing really bad to say about this guy.
That's like Michael Thomas numbers.
Yeah. Oh, with the only person who had more yards per game than him was Michael Thomas.
There you go. I mean, 71% catch rate. Thomas, I believe, was even higher. But if you catch everything they throw at you, that's somewhat helpful.
The catch rate's a little skewed when you have Jameis Winston just throwing things
exactly.
near you, but not to you.
Right. Exactly. Closest receiver. We're going to pin this on Godwin. But yeah, that's terrific. Only 1 drop, no fumbles. And he had a similar ceiling with Evans, where he had 1 game over 30 and then 2 more over 40. But as I referenced earlier, he had a better floor. He only had 2 games under 10. So he gave you 3 more games over 20 on DraftKings. So just more consistent, a better floor. That comes from being that possession receiver, getting 86 catches in 14 games. So he had a real shot at 100 catches if he played 16 games, and he averaged 19.94 points per game on DraftKings. So just an excellent return on value. And yeah. I agree. I think he's going to absolutely thrive with Brady. Now, as for the third receiver, I'm going to let you talk about whoever you think is going to be the third most important wide receiver. The other news we have here is that Rashad Perriman is gone, and he was in that role last year. He caught 36 passes, over 600 yards, and 6 touchdowns, almost 18 yards a catch. So that is a significant hole and a real opportunity that someone's going to take advantage of.
Yeah, Perriman was pretty much an afterthought until those 2 guys went down, and then he was just on fire the last couple of weeks. That's what you get in an offense built with Bruce Arians. But for me, there's probably 3 receivers that might interchange for this role, depending on if it's a 3 wide receiver set, 4 wide receiver set, 5 wide receiver set. But I see Scotty Miller had a little role last year. I don't know if he's going to take this lead, but him, Justin Watson, are 2 guys returning who could compete for this league, this spot. But I like their 5th round draft pick out of Minnesota, Tyler Johnson. I think he might win this in camp. We'll see. But he was productive in college. He's another guy, tall guy, 6'1", 206 pounds. But in college, he had 164 catches, almost 2,500 yards, and 25 touchdowns his last 2 years as a junior and senior. He wins jump ball battles. So something that this team struggles with. I know Mike Evans is 6'5", and he has that, but Chris Godwin's not a jump ball guy. In a red zone situation, this guy could win a jump ball. He's not explosive, but he's a really good red zone option. And if he wins this third receiver role, you have 2 guys who need to be looked at, and then a Gronk. We'll just call him a Gronk, who also needs to be looked at. So he's going to be able to work his way around the middle of the field, which I think he'll be pretty good at. But I think those are the 3 guys who are going to be competing in this spot. And we also might see, I know Bruce Arians doesn't do this a lot, but Brady is used to this, a lot of 2 tight end sets.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that Tyler Johnson is likely to emerge here as the guy that gets that opportunity as the third wide receiver. We'll talk about it throughout this virtual tour of the NFL repeatedly, but it's going to be tougher. It's going to be tougher for these rookies to get entrenched early with this unique offseason. And it's certainly, in general, harder for wide receivers. They usually do much better in their second year in the NFL. So that'll be a challenge for Tyler Johnson. But I agree, just a really solid skill set. He doesn't wow you with the speed, but very productive at Minnesota. And last 2 years, he's run about 80% of his snaps, his routes out of the slot. So I like that pick in the 5th round. I think he's more likely to do damage long term than the other guys. Scotty Miller, only 13 catches last year and 1 touchdown, and Watson 16 catches in 2 years. He got in the end zone twice last year, but nothing to really jump off the page. So I like Tyler Johnson. And then in terms of the tight ends, you mentioned having a Gronk. Isn't it nice to actually have the Gronk?
Yeah. Anytime you could put that guy in the lineup and he's healthy, you know what you're getting. One of, if not the best tight end out there. Fantastic blocker all throughout his career, and it seems obvious because he's just a massive specimen that he could block people. It's something that they needed. They struggled. Their biggest struggles on the offensive line were at the tackle positions. We mentioned that they went out and drafted one, signed one, and then they signed this big, massive guy at tight end who can help them out and chip block. But you have a Gronk. Even if you get a 70% Gronk that you are accustomed to, that's still 70% of the best tight end that was playing when he was healthy. But a familiar face of Brady. The one thing you mentioned, people aren't getting the offseason work in that we're accustomed to. So at least for Brady, he's familiar with the Gronk. The last 3 times that they played together, they were in the Super Bowl, won 2 of them. He's just a safety valve option, and we'll see if he gets that weight back up, because he's looking a lot more lean and thin than the 260 that he was when he was playing. But maybe that's good for him because he has had back problems. He had wrist problems. He's had all types of problems. But Gronk is, well, I can't imagine him not being a top 5 tight end, especially in today's landscape of tight end. It's kind of like the catcher position in baseball. There's a few of them, and then the rest are you throw a dart and hope they land for that day.
Yeah, that tight end room is just going to be incredible with Gronk at the helm. What a career. Almost 8,000 yards, over 500 catches, 79 touchdowns. And that'll be the real X factor this year off. He's been doing different stuff instead of pounding the weights and the calories. He's been out having fun. But maybe he'll come back fresh and like you said, take advantage of a little less weight on the frame. And with the other 2 tight ends that we're going to talk about, it's not like he's going to have to play every snap and be in there for every blocking down. I think they're going to keep him fresh and take advantage of the depth, and certainly that's going to go a long way with the lifetime of trust in NFL terms that Brady and Gronk have. So that'll be a huge edge.
And then when you think about it, when was the last time that a team went up against Gronk and he wasn't the focus of the defensive attention? Now you have an Evans and a Godwin on the sides. Gronk's not your main guy anymore, and he could just do what he's always done, go up the seams, get open. It's going to be different for him especially, and I think he's going to love it.
Oh, it's scary to think about it. I mean, the guy, it's like Gronk is going to go overlooked, and all of a sudden he's going to catch one of those balls in the seam, and then somebody from the secondary is going to have to try to tackle him, and as he's just bulldozing over them, heading for the end zone. It's going to be scary.
Even his new lean, thin down frame, he's still huge. So I mean, it's going to be scary.
Yeah, it is. So as for the other 2 guys, in season long, you talk about tight end 1, and I think they really have 3 tight end 1s in the traditional sense of the season long. And guys that, if they all still stay healthy, I think they could all certainly be, top half of the league in terms of tight end production. And they've got 3 of them. It's just crazy. So let's look at O.J. Howard. They just picked up his 5th-year option. A little bit of a down year last year, with only one touchdown, but he's another big weapon in that 6'6", 250 range.
Yeah, this guy's a freak athlete too. Pretty much the size of Gronk. He was awesome in college. Um, the one thing that Arians, like I mentioned earlier, doesn't do is he doesn't utilize his tight ends as he just doesn't. We thought OJ Howard would be the one to break that mold last year, but he wasn't. But Brady loves his tight ends. So a two-time NFL Coach of the Year winner, I think, is going to mold to his all-time great quarterback and put a lot more pass plays directed to Gronk, directed to OJ Howard, because they are freak athletes and they are just massive specimens. And then, yeah, you mentioned it, Cam Brate. I wouldn't target him in fantasy just because he's the third string tight end, but this guy could start on at least 5, 6, 7 NFL teams right now. And he's your third tight end. He's always been a huge red zone guy. Pretty much the best. I think he might be the best red zone tight end on this team, and that's saying a lot. He's always there. So you can count on him getting a couple random touchdowns, especially with Brady throwing the ball, because he doesn't. As long as you're open and you can get open in that red zone, he'll throw it to you. But this is just a really stacked 1, 2, 3, and you mentioned it. You don't need them playing. You don't need Gronk playing 80% of the snaps because you have an OJ Howard and a Cam Brate to take on the blocking duties, to get it, taking the pass routes. This is just a weapons galore for this team.
I mean, Arians and Brady right now, again, virtually have to just be giddy together. Anytime they get together on Zoom or however they talk, I mean, they just have to be, foaming at the mouth to get out there and start dissecting defenses with all these weapons and so much versatility to be able to, maybe put two tight ends out there at once and mix it up. Howard, he got 69% of the snaps last year and Brady 38%. So there was a little bit of time where they'd be out there together, but mostly Brady came in to catch. He had 36 receptions in a much lower snap percentage, where Howard only ended up with 34 catches, and Brady had the 4 touchdowns. So, like you said, very effective in the red zone. Had a nice chemistry with Winston, and he had 4 games over 10 and a ceiling game of 17.3 against New Orleans, when he didn't even get in the end zone. He caught 10 passes for 73 yards. So, again, one more reason for Brady to be extremely excited.
Yeah. This is just a gluttonous of weapons for him.
Just absurd.
And then we'll get to the running game, which
yeah, that's right. We haven't even talked about the running game. How about that? Who do you think's gonna come out and have the best production out of this group?
I know we talked about it right before we went on, and we kind of had a conflicting view. Arians traditionally, besides a couple years, he likes to play the running back by committee role. I know David Johnson cut through that one year, but he usually plays the RBBC, as we like to call it. But if I had to pick a lead back on here, I'd have to go with Ronald Jones. I know he had an absolutely dreadful rookie year. It was maybe the worst rookie year ever. I don't know, one of them. But he wasn't bad his second year. He had a solid second year. 172 carries last year, 724 yards, 4.2 yards per carry. Not great, but nothing bad. 6 touchdowns. In the passing game, he had a pretty good role. 40 targets, 31 catches, another 309 yards. I only had a couple fumbles, which wasn't bad, but he had 28 broken tackles, which is pretty good. He didn't play a full season. He split a lot of time with Peyton Barber, who's now gone, and he had 28 broken tackles from that. But I think he was pretty good. He had 415 yards after contact. If you look, his yards before contact were 1.8, but he averaged 4.2 yards per carry, and he had averaged 2.4 yards after contact per rush, which is really good for a guy who's not going to cost you a pretty penny there. But I think he should take this lead role. Maybe, I know you're going to touch on him, Keyshawn Vaughn's going to steal some thunder from him, and I think Keyshawn Vaughn's a big, bulky dude. Get you those 3rd and 1s, third and 2 type of carries and goal line carries, which would hurt Ronald Jones, but I think Jones is more of the 20 to 20 type guy.
Interesting. Yeah. So for the RBBC, they certainly it was a three-headed monster for Tampa last year. Jones ended up getting 36% of the snaps. Barber had 30%, and then Ogunbowale had 32%. And as you mentioned, Barber's gone now, thankfully, because that was always a mess in terms of fantasy. Who's going to start? Who's going to get the most touches? And he just didn't do much with his touches. He was only 3.1 yards per carry, and he only caught 16 passes. So they certainly prefer Jones in that 4.2 yards per carry. He was better out of the backfield with 31 catches. He had one game against Arizona where he caught 8 passes for 77 yards. So he's shown that potential. But for me, he just doesn't do anything that I think is that exciting or thrilling or wow, this guy is certainly going to be our starter. I mean, I think he's got the experience. He's probably the favorite to come out in the first few weeks as the starter. But Keyshawn Vaughn, I think he's got some potential to be that lead back. He 2 years ago in college, he was terrific, over 1,200 yards and almost 8 yards per carry. Last year, not quite as efficient. He got 1,000 yards, but he was only 5.2 yards per carry. But he caught 39 passes. In the last 2 years at Vanderbilt, he had 21 rushing touchdowns. And he got better with the drops, 0 and 3 the last 2 years. By the way, it was his birthday yesterday, so we got to stay positive here with Vaughn and say only good things about him.
Happy birthday.
For a third-round pick who ran 4.51 in the 40, I think he's going to get the chance to take the lead role, if not in the first few weeks, at some point. The other back who we touched on is Dare Ogunbowale, and he was really that third-down specialist to come in and catch passes. And funny, his first 2 years, he played 3 snaps in the NFL. He didn't get any touches. So last year was the first time he actually got any touches, and he only carried the ball 11 times, but he caught 35 balls, 76% catch rate, 8.2 yards per reception. He only had one game over 10, and that was when he had his rushing touchdown. But he's a guy. So as a third down back who comes in and catches passes, I like to target those guys on DraftKings when they're cheap, in that low 3K range. But I'm a little bit concerned for him this year with Vaughn now, coming in and having that ability to catch passes. So I probably will look elsewhere for a value back that I'm looking to target to catch passes on DraftKings. What are your thoughts on Ogunbowale?
Yeah, I'm going to overlook him. I think he's more of I'm going to compare it to the New England teams, more of a Brandon Bolden type guy who's going to play some special teams, get in some snaps here and there, maybe catch a couple passes, get 2 or 3 runs, but he's not going to get take many handoffs. I just don't see that happening. And there is a fourth guy there that they drafted in the 7th round that I think is the most explosive running back on this team. He's too small to be a featured guy, but he's going to fit right into the James White mold, I think, or as Bruce Arians used to have, Andre Ellington, another small scat back type of guy. This guy, Raymond Calais, they drafted him in the 7th round. He's just explosive with the ball in his hands. Just one of those guys that when you have him in space, it's going to be hard to find him. He's only 5'8", 190 pounds, but he runs a 4.4 40. In college, he averaged 7.8 yards per carry, which is just awesome. And he's also a really good kick and punt returner. I think he could take both of those jobs, especially if Ronald Jones, who was doing that. I know you mentioned it before we went on, Antoine Winfield Jr. also returns punts. But if this guy is more of a scat back and Jones has more role on the offense, I think he can take both return jobs. He wasn't really used in the passing game in college, but that doesn't mean that he can't be. We've seen that happen a lot. But his junior year and senior year, he started to see the field more, and he was just extremely productive. And I think when you have a guy like Bruce Arians who knows how to use these type of scat backs and gets people like this in open space, when he gets his play called, he's just going to be explosive. I think in terms of DFS, he would be more of a GPP dart throw because he's not going to have that consistent role. But we've seen it happen a lot over the years, that third down backs and guys like an Austin Eckler, who turned himself into a feature back this year. James White, another guy with the New England route. We've seen people like this be very productive for a very cheap price. And if you're fitting in a top quarterback and you're going with a star wide receiver to pair him in the right matchup, where you think that you're going to be more of those, not even passing situations, but short passes where you need to use him. He's a guy I wouldn't mind looking at, but I'll have to see how this role plays out early in the year, because with everything that's going down, I don't know if we'll get a full training camp to see where he actually fits in.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Calais, and he certainly will be a guy to watch because James White, if he can be anything close to that anytime soon, that would be phenomenal. James White's one of my favorite fantasy guys on DraftKings, just incredible. And so a guy like Brady is looking for a player like that he can trust. And so if Calais wins that role, and he also has the potential to take one to the house on a kick return, then we're starting to talk about a GPP dart throw that I would target. So I agree. Let's keep an eye on him and see if he takes that role from Ogunbowale and starts to get some consistent snaps and targets. Well, that wraps up the backfield for us. So let's continue the transition through this draft class. We touched earlier on how the Buccaneers drafted some protection for Brady in the first round, and Tristan Wirfs, the tackle for Iowa. We've touched on Keyshawn Vaughn, who they got in the third round. We've touched on Tyler Johnson, the fifth rounder, wide receiver from Minnesota. Anybody else you want to cover, or anything else you want to touch on from the 2020 draft for the Buccaneers?
Yeah, we touched on Calais too, and then they had Antoine Winfield in the second round, safety out of Minnesota. His dad was Antoine Winfield Sr., one of a great D-back. If he's anything like his dad, that's a huge get for him. We mentioned that this team was easily targetable in their secondary, so maybe he can help bring some stabilization to a secondary that struggled last year, which is a key point. And then they had Khalil Davis, another D lineman from Nebraska, just to add to that depth. And then Chappelle Russell, another linebacker from Temple in the sixth round, again to add to the depth. Really no big standout guys besides Antoine Winfield, besides the guys we mentioned, who might come in and get a role or get a starting job, or get a prominent role from day one.
Excellent. So, final question for you, Santino. Actually, two-part question. First of all, where can everybody find you on Twitter? And then I want to know, can Tampa catch New Orleans here and maybe win the division?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Santino Caccone. That's at SANTINOCACCONE. And as far as that second question, if you look at Tom Brady's career, take out that second year where he became the starter, he's won at least 10 games every time he's played at least 10 games. In the last however many years, the lowest was 11 games. If this team won 7-9 with Jameis Winston just giving points away like on candy on Halloween, this team should win 11 games. We'll see what the offseason, the not having the offseason does, and not having the familiarity with Belichick's system does. But 11 games seems very reasonable for this team. They were only 2-6 at home last year. Now you get Tom Brady. I can see that flipping to 6-2. As far as catching the Saints, I mean, you have another Hall of Fame, one of the best quarterbacks to do it, and Drew Brees out there. No slouch. They're stacked all around. I don't know if they'll catch the Saints, but it's going to be pretty close. And I think at least a wild card berth is well within the realm of possibilities for this team.
Yeah, I like that. I think betting on Tampa to just make the playoffs is the way to go. They do have a tough schedule. The actual details of the schedule will come out later this week on Thursday. But I agree. I would not bet against Brady. I think he'll be part of the postseason with this crew. So as
I
we
wouldn't
wrap up,
I
go ahead.
wouldn't mind throwing a bet on them to win the division though, looking at the odds, because I mean it's they're going to be close. I don't think they'll do it, but it's worth throwing a couple, like $100 or so on that if it's plus 300 or something. That's pretty good odds.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun battle. And you and I are going to continue the NFC South talk tomorrow. We're going to break down the Falcons. But I do want to mention one more time, go check out our website, DFSCoachTalk.com, and you can become a member. Also, give us a thumbs up wherever you're watching. If you're watching on YouTube, we are providing these daily podcasts by video. And then wherever podcasts are heard, give us a thumbs up. We would greatly appreciate that. Santino gave you his Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Language Olympic. I want to mention one time we are starting to cover the KBO. So if you join DFS Coach Talk, we'll provide you with a lineup every day for DraftKings and FanDuel. And Coach likes us to mention his favorite charity, which is mambaon3.org. Santino, did I hit everything? Any final thoughts?
I believe so. Yeah, and then me and you are on tomorrow. Yeah, you mentioned. Yeah, I think you did it. Like
Okay.
as always.
Excellent. Well, it took us about 15 to 20 minutes to talk about the new quarterback in town. We thought we'd have a little fun with that. So he was not really the headline of our show today by design, but he will be the headline for the Buccaneers this year, along with not only a Gronk, but the Gronk. It's going to be a lot of fun watching the Buccaneers this year. Santino, I had a lot of fun with you today. So
Likewise,
let's do it again tomorrow.
Sounds good.
All right. On behalf of Santino Cocone, I am Andrew Hansen. Thank you so much for tuning in, and be sure to tune in again tomorrow for another episode of DFS Coach Talk.